Welcome to the Sleepy Engineering channel. I'm glad you're here. Get comfortable. Settle into your pillows, adjust your blankets, and let yourself relax. Tonight, we're going on a journey through the fascinating history of human innovation, not with excitement or drama, but with the calm, gentle exploration perfect for drifting off to sleep. Each night on this channel, we explore a different technology, a different piece of engineering that has shaped our modern world. We'll trace its origins from the earliest experiments and curious minds, through decades or even centuries of refinement and innovation, to the sophisticated systems we rely on today. These aren't just stories about machines and inventions, they're stories about human ingenuity, about problems solved one small step at a time, about the persistent belief that we can build something better. Tonight's topic is the computer. Over the next few hours, we'll discover 100 fascinating facts about how this technology came to be, the brilliant minds who developed it, and the incremental improvements that brought us from those first tentative experiments to the remarkable capabilities we have today. You don't need to stay awake for all of it. In fact, the whole point is that you won't. Let my voice become background, a gentle companion as you drift towards sleep. If you wake during the night, the story will still be here, continuing its patient exploration through history and innovation. There's no test tomorrow, no need to remember every detail, just relax and let the story wash over you. So close your eyes if you'd like, breathe deeply, and let's begin our journey into the world of the computer. Let's begin with something so familiar, so everyday, that you probably never think about it. The QWERTY keyboard layout. Right now, whether on your laptop, your desktop, or even your phone, the keys are arranged in that particular pattern, coup de blow across the top row. But have you ever wondered why? Why that specific arrangement? The answer takes us back to 1873. Typewriters. Those mechanical writing machines with metal arms that would swing up and strike an ink ribbon against paper. When people typed quickly, these metal arms, called type bars, would sometimes collide with each other and jam. It was frustrating, slowing down the whole process. So, the QWERTY layout was designed specifically to separate commonly used letter combinations, reducing those jams. The layout wasn't about speed or efficiency for the typist. It was about the mechanical limitations of the machine itself. And here's the remarkable thing. We don't use typewriters anymore. We haven't for decades. Our modern keyboards have no type bars to jam. And yet, that same layout persists. It's a little piece of 19th century engineering that we carry into the digital age every single day. Sometimes we hold on to things simply because they're familiar, because relearning would be too difficult. The QWERTY keyboard is a beautiful example of how history echoes into the present. Now, let's drift back even further in time. Back to the 1830s. Victorian England. A time of steam engines and gaslight. And in this era, there was a man named Charles Babbage. Babbage was a mathematician, an inventor, a dreamer, and he was working on something that seemed almost like science fiction for his time. He called it the analytical engine. This wasn't just a calculator. Calculators had existed for centuries. This was different. This was the first conceptual general-purpose computer. Babbage imagined a machine that could be programmed to perform different tasks, not just one specific function. It would have memory. It would have a processing unit. It would read instructions from punched cards, similar to the cards used in the mechanical looms of the time. The analytical engine was never fully built in Babbage's lifetime. The technology of the era couldn't quite match his vision. But the ideas he put forward, the architecture he designed, was decades, even centuries, ahead of its time. He saw the future of computing before the tools existed to make it real. And working alongside Babbage was a truly remarkable woman. Ada Lovelace, the daughter of the poet Lord Byron, though she never really knew her father. Ada had a brilliant mathematical mind, and she became fascinated with Babbage's analytical engine. In the 1840s, Ada wrote what we now recognize as the first algorithm intended to be processed by a machine. She didn't just understand how the analytical engine would work. She saw beyond that. She imagined that such a machine could do more than just calculate numbers. She wrote about how it might one day compose music or create graphics. She saw possibilities that even Babbage himself hadn't fully grasped. Think about that for a moment. Before computers even existed in any practical form, Ada Lovelace was writing instructions for them. She's considered the world's first computer programmer, imagining possibilities that wouldn't be realized for another 100 years. She saw the poetry in mathematics, the creativity in computation. Let's move forward now to 1936. The world is between two great wars, and a young British mathematician named Alan Turing is thinking deeply about the nature of computation itself. You might have heard his name. Perhaps you've seen films about him, about his work breaking codes during World War II. But before all that, Turing published a paper that introduced something called the Turing machine. Now, this wasn't a physical machine you could touch or see. It was theoretical, imaginary, a thought experiment. Picture an infinite strip of tape divided into squares. A machine that can read symbols on the tape, write symbols, and move left or right. Simple rules, simple operations. But what Turing did with this simple idea was profound. He defined what computation actually is at its most fundamental level. He answered the question, what does it mean to compute something? What problems can be solved by following a set of rules? What problems can't? His work laid the theoretical foundation for all modern computing. Every computer, every smartphone, every digital device is in some way a descendant of that theoretical Turing machine. Then, in 1945, a mathematician named John von Neumann wrote a report about a computer being developed, called EDVAC. Now, von Neumann wasn't the only person working on these ideas, but his report became incredibly influential. In it, he outlined something called the stored program concept. Before this, early computers had to be physically rewired to change what they did. Imagine having to pull out cables and reconnect them differently every time you wanted your computer to perform a different task. It was slow, cumbersome, inflexible. Von Neumann's idea was beautifully simple but revolutionary. Store both the data and the instructions in the same memory. Let the computer read its own instructions just like it reads data. This architecture, this fundamental design, meant computers could be easily reprogrammed. It meant software as we know it could exist. And remarkably, this is still the basis for most computers today. Your laptop, your phone, the computer in your car, they're all descendants of von Neumann's idea. That elegant insight from 1945 still shapes our digital world. Now let's shift our scene to Germany in the late 1930s. An engineer named Konrad Zuse was working away, largely in isolation. In 1938, working in his parents' apartment in Berlin, he created something called the Z1. This was the first programmable digital computer. It was mechanical, built from metal plates and pins that his parents helped him cut. It was huge, taking up most of their living room. And it actually worked. Zuse was working independently, cut off from other computer pioneers around the world. Yet he arrived at similar breakthroughs. It's fascinating how great ideas sometimes emerge in multiple places at once, as if the time is simply ripe for them. A few years later, in 1941, Zuse completed the Z3, and this machine holds a very special place in history. It became the first fully operational, programmable digital computer. while Babbage had designed one but never built it, and others had built pieces of the puzzle. The Z3 actually worked as a complete system. You could program it, it could compute, and it did so reliably. It used electromechanical relays, clicking switches that opened and closed electrical circuits. If you had been in the room with it, you would have heard it working. A symphony of clicks and clacks as it computed. Sadly, the original Z3 was destroyed during a bombing raid in World War II, but its legacy remained. Around the same time, across the ocean in Iowa, two men were working on their own contribution to computing history. John Atanasoff, a professor, and Clifford Berry, his graduate student. Together, they built the Atanasoff-Berry computer, completed in 1942. This machine was significant for a specific reason. It used electronic digital binary arithmetic. Let's break that down. Electronic, meaning it used electronics rather than mechanical gears and switches. Digital, meaning it worked with discrete values rather than continuous ones. And binary, meaning it used base 2 mathematics, ones and zeros, on and off, true and false. Binary is the language that computers still speak today. Every piece of data in your phone, every pixel on your screen, every word in this script ultimately comes down to patterns of ones and zeros. The Atanasoff-Berry computer helped establish that this was the right approach, the right language for electronic computation. During World War II, at a secret facility called Bletchley Park in England, something remarkable was being built in complete secrecy. A machine called Colossus, completed in 1943. This was the first programmable electronic digital computer. It was built for a crucial purpose during wartime: breaking codes. The German military used sophisticated encryption machines called Lorentz ciphers to protect their highest-level communications. Colossus was designed to help break these codes, to help the Allies read secret enemy messages. And it worked. It shortened the war, saved countless lives, gave the Allies a crucial advantage. But because of its military importance, Colossus remained classified, secret, for decades after the war ended. Many people working on computers in the following years had no idea Colossus had ever existed. History was hidden, a crucial chapter locked away. It's only in recent decades that Colossus has received its proper recognition as a milestone in computing history. Around the same time, another large computer was being built, this time at Harvard University in collaboration with IBM. The Harvard Mark I, completed in 1944. This was an electromechanical computer, a hybrid between the mechanical calculating machines of the past and the electronic computers of the future. It was used for ballistic calculations during the war, helping to calculate firing tables for artillery. These tables told gunners what angle to set their guns at 4 different distances and conditions. Before computers, people called computers, human mathematicians, would calculate these tables by hand. It was painstaking, time-consuming work. The Harvard Mark I was huge, about 50 feet long and 8 feet tall. It weighed 5 tons. And as it worked, it clicked and clacked, gears turning, relays switching. A symphony of mechanical calculation. It was beautiful in its own way, this massive machine dedicated to pure mathematics. And finally, let's end this segment with ENIAC, the Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer, completed in 1945 at the University of Pennsylvania. ENIAC was a giant, and I mean that quite literally. It filled an entire room, 30 feet by 50 feet. It weighed 30 tons, and it used over 17,000 vacuum tubes. Vacuum tubes were the predecessor to transistors, glowing glass tubes that could control electrical current. They were like specialized light bulbs for computation, and 17,000 of them, all glowing hot as ENIAC worked, made the room incredibly warm. The machine consumed as much power as a small neighborhood. But it was fast. ENIAC could calculate 1,000 times faster than any previous machine. Problems that would take human computers days or weeks could be solved in hours or minutes. It was massive, it was expensive, it consumed enormous amounts of power. But it represented a breakthrough moment when computers became truly practical for complex calculations. ENIAC was also programmed primarily by women. Mathematicians like Betty Holberton, Jean Bartik, and others. They figured out how to make this complex machine solve different problems, physically rewiring it for each new task. They were the first software engineers, though that term didn't exist yet. Rest easy knowing that generations of brilliant minds built, step by step, the foundation for the devices we use every day. Let yourself relax. Let these stories settle gently in your mind and drift peacefully into sleep. Let's continue our journey through computing history now. Moving into the late 1940s and early 1950s, a time when computers were transitioning from experimental curiosities to practical machines. Get comfortable, let your breathing slow, and drift along with these stories from the dawn of the computer age. We begin in Manchester, England, in 1948. At the University of Manchester, a team of researchers built something modest in size but monumental in significance. They called it the Baby, though its official name was the Small-Scale Experimental Machine, or S. The Baby wasn't designed to be a practical computer. It was a proof of concept, an experiment. And on June 21, 1948, it successfully ran the first stored program in history. Remember that stored program concept we talked about earlier, from von Neumann's report? The Baby made it real. The program it ran was simple, just a mathematical task to find the highest factor of a number. It took 52 minutes to complete, but those 52 minutes changed everything. For the first time, a computer was reading its instructions from its own memory, following a program that could be changed without rewiring anything. The Baby proved that stored program computing actually worked. The team in Manchester didn't stop there. Later that same year, in 1948, they expanded on the Baby's success and created the Manchester Mark I. This was a more complete, more capable version of the stored program computer. It had more memory, more instructions it could perform, more practical applications. The Manchester Mark I became a workhorse for mathematical research. Scientists could write programs to solve complex problems, and the computer would dutifully execute them. It was still experimental, still limited, but it showed the world what stored program computing could become. The foundation was laid. The future was becoming visible. Now let's travel across the Atlantic to 1949, where two interesting developments were happening almost simultaneously. First, there was BINAC, the Binary Automatic Computer, built by the Eckert-Moseley Computer Corporation, the same people who would soon create something even more famous. BINAC had a clever feature for its time. It used dual processors for error checking. Imagine two computers working side by side on the same problem, constantly checking each other's work. If they disagreed, you knew something had gone wrong. Early computers were unreliable. Vacuum tubes would burn out, connections would fail. Having two processors verify each other's calculations was an ingenious solution to this problem. BINAC was actually built for Northrop Aircraft Company, designed to be used in an experimental aircraft, though it never flew. The concept of redundancy, of having backup systems checking the main system, became important in critical computing applications. Think of spacecraft, computers, or medical equipment. That idea traces back to machines like BINAC. Also in 1949, back in England at Cambridge University, a computer called EDSAC came to life. The Electronic Delay Storage Automatic Calculator, EDSAC, became the second stored program electronic computer in the world, following Manchester's Baby and Mark I. But EDSAC was significant for another reason. It was designed from the start to be practical, to be useful for scientists and researchers. Its creator, Maurice Wilks, wanted to build a tool, not just a proof of concept. EDSAC was used for real scientific calculations, real research. It helped crystallographers understand protein structures. It aided meteorologists in weather prediction. EDSAC also introduced something we take completely for granted today: a library of subroutine, small programs that could be reused, called upon by other programs. The beginning of what we now call software libraries. Instead of writing every program completely from scratch, programmers could build on work that had already been done. It was the start of programming as a craft that could accumulate knowledge and tools over time. Moving into 1950 now, and computers are beginning to appear more frequently, each one contributing something new. At the National Bureau of Standards in Washington, D.C., a computer called SEAC was built. The standard's Eastern Automatic Computer SEAT introduced modular design principles. Instead of being one enormous custom-built machine, it was constructed from interchangeable units that could be removed and replaced. This made maintenance easier, made upgrades possible. If one unit failed, you could swap it out without dismantling the entire machine. SEAC also used mercury delay lines for memory. This is a fascinating technology if you think about it. Sound waves, actual acoustic pulses, traveling through tubes of liquid mercury, storing information as patterns of vibrations. The computer would send a pulse into one end of the tube, and milliseconds later, it would emerge from the other end. By constantly recirculating these pulses, by refreshing them, the computer could store data. It seems almost impossibly delicate, doesn't it? Memory made of sound waves in mercury. But it worked. It was one of several clever solutions engineers devised before better memory technologies emerged. Also in 1950, on the other side of the country, the National Bureau of Standards built another computer called SWAC, the standard's Western Automatic Computer, located in Los Angeles. SWAC was particularly fast for its time and became important for supporting early scientific simulations. Scientists were beginning to realize that computers could do more than just calculate. They could simulate, they could model complex systems that were impossible to study otherwise. Weather patterns, nuclear reactions, the behavior of materials under stress. SWAC helped pioneer this kind of work, showing that computers could be partners in scientific discovery, not just calculating machines. And then we reach 1951, a pivotal year. 3 significant computers all emerged in this single year, each representing a different aspect of computing's future. First, the Ferrante Mark I, built by the British company Ferrante, based on the Manchester Mark I we discussed earlier. The Ferrante Mark I became the first commercially available stored program computer in the world. This wasn't a one-off experimental machine or a custom build for a single customer. This was a product. Multiple units were manufactured and sold. The era of computers as commercial products had begun. Organizations could now purchase a computer, have it installed, and use it for their own purposes. The price was enormous. Of course, these machines cost as much as large buildings. But the possibility was there. Computing was becoming a business, an industry. Also in 1951, in the United States, UNIVAC appeared, the Universal Automatic Computer, also built by Eckert and Maudsley's company, now part of Remington Rand. UNIVAC became the first commercially successful computer in America. UNIF became famous in 1952 when it was used on television to predict the outcome of the presidential election. Most experts thought the race would be close, but UNIF correctly predicted a landslide for Eisenhower when only a small percentage of votes had been counted. People watching at home saw a computer make a prediction that seemed impossible and then watched it come true. Suddenly, computers weren't just for scientists and engineers, they were in the public consciousness. UNIVAC was eventually sold to many organizations, government agencies, large corporations, research institutions. Each unit was custom installed, a major undertaking. But it showed that computers had a market, that organizations would invest in this technology. And finally, also in 1951, something quite different. Leo I, the Lyons Electronic Office, built by J. Lyons and Company, a British food and catering company. Yes, a catering company built a computer. Leo I was the first computer used for business operations. Not scientific calculations, not code breaking, but business. Payroll, inventory, scheduling, the mundane but essential operations that keep a company running. Lyons realized that many business tasks involved repetitive calculations that a computer could handle. They had the vision to commission a computer, hiring some of the people who had worked on EDSAC, and adapt it for business use. Leo I calculated the cost of ingredients for the company's bakeries, worked out delivery schedules, managed payroll for thousands of employees. It seems so ordinary now, doesn't it? Computers handling business operations. But someone had to be first. Someone had to see that these massive, expensive machines could do more than advanced mathematics. They could help run a business. And that vision, that practical application, helped open up an entirely new market for computing. In just a handful of years, computers transformed from experimental prototypes to products, from pure research to practical tools, from laboratories to businesses. Let these stories settle gently as you relax deeper. The rapid progress of human ingenuity, building toward the world we know today. Rest easy and let yourself drift. Let's move forward now into a new era, the 1950s and early 1960s, a time when computers were about to transform in fundamental ways. Get comfortable. Let your mind wander gently through these stories of innovation and change. We need to start with something that happened in 1947, before we even finished talking about those early computers. At Bell Labs in New Jersey, 3 scientists, John Bardeen, Walter Brattain, and William Shockley, invented something that would change everything. The transistor. Remember all those vacuum tubes we mentioned? The 17,000 tubes glowing hot in ENIAC. Vacuum tubes worked, but they had problems. They were large, about the size of your thumb. They generated tremendous heat. They burned out frequently, like light bulbs, and they consumed enormous amounts of power. The transistor did the same job as a vacuum tube, controlling the flow of electricity, switching it on and off, but it did so in a tiny, solid piece of semiconductor material. No glass envelope, no glowing filament, no vacuum inside. Just a small crystal of silicon or germanium with a few wires attached. Transistors were smaller, more reliable, generated less heat, and used less power. The difference was dramatic. A computer that filled a room with vacuum tubes could be shrunk down to the size of a desk with transistors. The invention of the transistor didn't just improve computers. It made possible everything that came after. Every electronic device you own, every smartphone and laptop and digital watch exists because of the transistor. It took a few years for transistors to make their way into computers. The technology needed to mature, manufacturing needed to be scaled up. But in 1954, a computer called TRADIC appeared. The transistor digital computer built for the United States Air Force. TRADIC became the first commercial transistorized computer. It was designed for airborne use, for military aircraft. You couldn't put a computer full of fragile vacuum tubes in an airplane. The vibration, the temperature changes, the power requirements, it wouldn't work. But with transistors, it became possible. TRADIC only used about 100 watts of power. A previous vacuum tube computer with similar capability might have used thousands of watts. The military saw the potential immediately. Smaller, more reliable, more efficient computers meant they could go places and do things that weren't possible before. But this was just the beginning. While transistors were emerging, the computer industry was also taking shape in other ways. In 1952, IBM, International Business Machines, a company that had made its name selling punch card tabulators and business machines, entered the world of electronic computers with the IBM 701. The 701 was designed for scientific computing. It was fast, it was powerful, and it marked IBM's serious entry into this new field. IBM had been watching the success of UNIVAC and other early computers. They realized this wasn't just a niche market for research institutions. This was the future of their business. IBM brought something to computing that the smaller, pioneering companies couldn't match: manufacturing capability, sales force, service organization, business expertise. When IBM committed to computers, they committed fully. The 701 was expensive. 19 units were built and installed, but it proved IBM could compete in this space. Then, in 1954, IBM introduced the 650, and this machine changed the game entirely. The IBM 650 became the first mass-produced computer. Not dozens of units, hundreds. Eventually, nearly 2,000 IBM 650 systems were installed around the world. The 650 wasn't the fastest computer, it wasn't the most advanced, but it was reliable, it was supported, and importantly, it was available. IBM could manufacture them in quantity, deliver them, install them, train people to use them, and maintain them. This was computing becoming an industry, becoming infrastructure. Universities bought them for research and education. Corporations bought them for accounting and business operations. Government agencies bought them for administration and analysis. The IBM 650 made computers common enough that a generation of programmers and engineers learned their craft on these machines. It democratized access, at least within large institutions. 2 years later, in 1956, IBM introduced something else revolutionary: the IBM 305 RAMAC, the random access method of accounting and control. And attached to this computer was something entirely new: the first hard disk drive. Before this, computers stored data on magnetic tape or punch cards or other sequential media. If you wanted data that was stored at the end of a tape, you had to wind through the whole tape to get there. Time-consuming, inflexible. The hard disk drive in RAMAC used 50 magnetic disks, each 2 feet in diameter, spinning together on a spindle. An arm with a read-write head could move to any track on any disk and access data in a fraction of a second. Random access. You could jump directly to any piece of information without reading through everything before it. The entire drive could store about 5 megabytes of data. That sounds tiny now, doesn't it? 5 megabytes. Your phone probably has thousands of times more storage. But in 1956, 5 megabytes of random access storage was revolutionary. It changed how databases worked, how information could be organized and retrieved. The hard disk drive became fundamental to computing. Every computer you've used probably had one, at least until very recently, when solid-state drives started replacing them. Now let's jump to 1958 and another breakthrough. Jack Kilby, working at Texas Instruments, created the integrated circuit. Up until this point, even with transistors, computers were built by connecting individual components together. Each transistor was separate, each resistor was separate, each capacitor was separate, all wired together on circuit boards. Kilby had an idea. What if you could create all the components of a circuit? The transistors and resistors and connections, all on a single piece of semiconductor material. Instead of assembling a circuit from parts, you would fabricate the entire circuit as one integrated unit. His first integrated circuit was crude, just a few components on a piece of germanium. But it worked, and the implications were staggering. If you could put multiple components on one chip, you could eventually put dozens, hundreds, thousands, millions of components on a single chip. The integrated circuit revolutionized electronics. It made computers smaller, faster, cheaper, and more reliable. It's the foundation of all modern electronics. Moving into 1960 now, and computers are diversifying. Different companies trying different approaches. Controlled Data Corporation introduced the CDC 1604, which pioneered character addressable memory. This might sound technical, but it mattered. Earlier computers worked with numbers, with words of data that were processed as complete units. But text, human language, is made of individual characters, letters, and punctuation. The 1604 could address memory at the character level, making it more efficient for processing text and handling data in smaller chunks. It was particularly good for business applications, where you're working with names and addresses and descriptions, not just pure numbers. In 1961, Burroughs, another major computer manufacturer, introduced the B5000. This machine pioneered something called stack-based architecture. The way the computer organized its operations, the way it handled data and instructions internally, was based on a data structure called a stack. Think of a stack of plates. You put plates on top, and you take plates off the top. Last in, first out. The B5000 used this principle in how it processed information. It made certain kinds of programming easier and more elegant. The B5000 was designed with high-level programming languages in mind, particularly languages like ALGOL. It was a computer built around the idea that humans would program it with sophisticated languages, and the hardware should support that. Also, in 1961, IBM created something called the IBM Stretch, or the IBM 7030. This was an ambitious supercomputer project, designed to be the fastest computer in the world. Stretch introduced several innovations, including something called look-ahead processing. The computer would look ahead in the program, see what instructions were coming up, and start preparing for them before it was actually time to execute them. It would predict which way a program might branch and start working on that path. If the prediction was right, you saved time. If it was wrong, you'd have to discard that work and try again. But often the gamble paid off. This kind of speculative execution, this look-ahead processing, became a standard technique in modern processors. Your computer's processor right now is probably doing something similar, constantly trying to guess what you'll do next and preparing for it. Stretch was ahead of its time in many ways, though it was also expensive and difficult to build. Only a handful were ever made. In just a little over a decade, from the invention of the transistor in 1947 to these sophisticated machines of the early 1960s, computers transformed utterly. From room-sized vacuum tube machines to transistorized systems, from one-off prototypes to mass-produced products, from experimental devices to essential tools for science, business, and government. Let yourself drift along with this progress, this remarkable acceleration of human ingenuity as you settle deeper into rest. Let's step back for a moment now. Back to 1951. We've talked about computers from this era, but there was one machine we haven't mentioned yet. Something different. Something special. At MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, engineers built a computer called Whirlwind. Most computers of this time worked in what we call batch mode. You'd prepare your program, submit it, wait your turn, and eventually get your results back. Hours or even days later. There was no conversation with the computer, no interaction. Whirlwind, was different. It became the first real-time computer. Real-time means the computer responds immediately to input, fast enough to interact with events as they happen. Whirlwind was built for the military, designed to track aircraft and help coordinate air defense. Information from radar stations would come in, and the computer needed to process it instantly. Update displays, help operators make decisions in the moment. This idea that you could interact with a computer in real time, that it could respond to you immediately, was radical. It opened up entirely new possibilities. Flight simulation, process control, interactive displays. Whirlwind showed that computers could be partners, responding to the world as it changed, not just calculating predetermined problems. Fast forward now to 1960, and we meet the PDP-1, the Programmed Data Processor 1, built by a company called Digital Equipment Corporation, or DEC. The PDP-1 was smaller and less expensive than the massive mainframes dominating computing at the time. It cost about $120,000, which sounds expensive, but mainframes cost millions. More importantly, the PDP-1 introduced interactive computing to a wider audience. It had a display screen, a keyboard. You could type commands and see results immediately. It felt responsive, alive. And because it was more accessible, more playful, people started experimenting. Some MIT students created a game on the PDP-1 called Space Trips. 2 spaceships dueling around a star, with gravity pulling them in. Players controlled their ships in real time, firing missiles at each other. It was mesmerizing. People would crowd around the PDP-1 to play or watch. It was probably the first real video game, and it showed that computers could be fun, could be creative, could be about more than just serious calculations. Now we jump ahead to 1964, to the Stanford Research Institute in California. A researcher named Douglas Engelbart was thinking about how humans interact with computers. Keyboards were fine for typing, but what if you wanted to point at something on a screen? What if you wanted to select, to move things around? Engelbart invented the computer mouse. His first prototype was a wooden shell with 2 wheels inside and a button on top. When you moved it across your desk, the wheels would roll, and the computer could sense that movement and move a cursor on the screen accordingly. It seems so obvious now, doesn't it? The mouse is such a natural part of using a computer that we barely think about it. But someone had to imagine it first. Someone had to build that first wooden prototype and demonstrate that this was a better way to interact with computers. Engelbart saw the future of human-computer interaction, and he built a piece of it with his own hands. The mouse wouldn't become common for years, though. It was too expensive, too unusual. Computers of the 1960s and early 70s still relied mostly on keyboards and commands. But Engelbart's invention was waiting, ready for the right moment. That moment came at Xerox PARC, the Palo Alto Research Center. In the early 1970s, Xerox had assembled an incredible team of researchers and given them freedom to imagine the future of computing. And in 1973, they built something remarkable. The Xerox Alto. The Alto wasn't sold commercially. It was a research system, used internally at Xerox and at some universities. But it introduced ideas that would shape all of personal computing. Windows on the screen, multiple programs visible at once. Icons representing files and programs, things you could see and manipulate. And a mouse to point and click and move things around. The Alto made computing visual and intuitive. Instead of typing cryptic commands, you could point at what you wanted. Instead of text scrolling by, you had windows you could arrange. It was closer to how we naturally think about manipulating objects in the physical world. The Alto showed what personal computing could be, even though it would take another decade for these ideas to reach most people. Also, in 1973, another innovation, the Wong 2200, a desktop computer from Wong Laboratories. The Wong 2200 introduced raster scan graphics, the same way television displays work. The screen was made up of hundreds of horizontal lines, scanned from top to bottom, refreshing dozens of times per second. By controlling which dots on which lines were lit up, you could create images, graphics, visualizations. This might seem like a small technical detail, but it mattered. Earlier computer displays often used vector graphics, drawing lines directly from point to point. Raster scanning made it easier to fill areas, to create complex images, to display photographs eventually. It's the foundation of how almost every screen works today. But let's step back again to 1971, because something fundamental was happening. At Intel, a company that made memory chips, an engineer named Ted Hoff and his team created the Intel 4004. The first microprocessor. Remember how we talked about computers having processors, the part that actually does the computing. Previously, processors were built from many separate chips and components wired together. The 4004 put an entire processor on a single chip of silicon. 4-bit computing, fairly limited, originally designed for a calculator. But it was a complete processor on one chip. This launched the microprocessor era. Soon, there were more powerful microprocessors. 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit, and if you could put a processor on a single chip, combine it with a few memory chips and other components, you could build a complete computer that was small and relatively inexpensive. The microprocessor made personal computers possible. In 1972, Hewlett-Packard introduced the HP 9830. HP had made calculators and test equipment, but the 9830 became their first desktop computer. It was designed for engineers and scientists, people who needed to perform calculations and analyze data. It had a keyboard, a small display, and it could be programmed in BASIC, a relatively easy programming language. The 9830 showed that computers were becoming tools that could sit on your desk, that you could own personally rather than sharing access to a massive mainframe. Professional desktop computing was emerging. The next year, 1973, in France, a small company created the Micro. This became Europe's first personal computer. It used an Intel 8008 microprocessor, had 2 kilobytes of memory, and was sold as a complete system. The Micro was ahead of its time. Not many were sold, but it demonstrated that personal computers were appearing in different parts of the world, that this wasn't just an American phenomenon. Then, 1975 arrived, and something sparked. A company called MITS, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, introduced a computer kit called the Altair 8800. It cost about $400 in kit form. You had to assemble it yourself, solder components, but when you were done, you had your own computer. The Altair 8800 sparked the PC revolution. It appeared on the cover of Popular Electronics magazine, and suddenly, thousands of hobbyists wanted one. Computer clubs formed, people shared programs, shared ideas. 2 young programmers, Paul Allen and Bill Gates, wrote a version of BASIC for the Altair. That little company they formed to write that software eventually became Microsoft. The Altair itself was limited. It didn't even have a keyboard or screen initially. You entered programs using switches on the front panel and read output from blinking lights. But it didn't matter. It was affordable. It was yours, and you could make it do whatever you could figure out how to program. The personal computer era had begun. In 1977, several important personal computers appeared, but one stands out. The Apple II, created by Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs. The Apple II wasn't a kit. It came fully assembled in a beige plastic case. It had a keyboard, it connected to your television, it could display color graphics, and it could make sound. More importantly, the Apple II was designed to be useful and accessible. It came with BASIC built-in. You could start writing programs immediately. It had expansion slots, so you could add capabilities, and soon there were floppy disk drives, so you could save and load programs and data easily. The Apple II popularized home computing. Schools bought them, families bought them, businesses bought them. Software developers wrote games, educational programs, productivity software. The Apple II showed that personal computers weren't just for hobbyists. They could be practical, valuable tools for normal people. Over the years, millions of Apple IIs were sold in various models. Then, in 1981, IBM, the company that had dominated business computing for decades, entered the personal computer market. The IBM PC, it used an Intel processor, ran an operating system called PC-DOS from Microsoft, and had an open architecture that other companies could build hardware and software for. The IBM PC standardized personal computers in many ways. Because IBM was trusted by businesses, companies that had been skeptical of personal computers suddenly took them seriously. And because IBM documented the PC's design and allowed other companies to create compatible machines, an entire industry of PC clones emerged. Personal computers became a commodity. Competition drove prices down and innovation up. The IBM PC and its descendants became the dominant platform for personal computing. The standard that most of the world used for the next several decades. It wasn't the most elegant or the most innovative, but it was open, it was supported, and it was everywhere. But there was one more revolution coming. In 1984, Apple introduced the Macintosh. Remember the Xerox Alto from 1973? The windows, the icons, the mouse. Apple had seen demonstrations of the Alto, and they understood the vision. The Macintosh brought graphical interfaces to a mass market. The Macintosh had a 9-inch screen displaying a graphical desktop. You used a mouse to point and click. You had windows that you could move around. Files looked like little icons of documents. The trash can actually looked like a trash can. It was intuitive in a way that command line interfaces could never be. The Macintosh also launched with a famous Super Bowl commercial directed by Ridley Scott, positioning it as a tool of creativity and individuality against conformity. The Macintosh didn't immediately dominate the market, but it popularized graphical interfaces. Eventually, Microsoft created Windows for IBM-compatible PCs, bringing similar visual interfaces to that platform. The ideas from the Xerox Alto, refined and made accessible by the Macintosh, became how we all use computers today. Point and click, windows and icons, visual and intuitive. Let these stories of transformation wash over you. From batch processing to real-time interaction. From cryptic commands to graphical interfaces. From room-sized mainframes to computers in every home. Rest in the knowledge of this remarkable journey and drift peacefully into sleep. Let's talk about connection now. About computers reaching out to each other, forming networks, and eventually creating the world we live in today. Settle in, breathe slowly, and let's explore how computers learned to communicate. We begin in 1960 with something called SAGE, the Semi-Automatic Ground Environment. This was a massive air defense system built for the United States and Canada during the Cold War. Dozens of radar stations scattered across North America, all feeding information to centralized computer centers. SAGE became the first large-scale computer network. Information flowed across telephone lines connecting these stations. Operators at different locations could see the same displays, track the same aircraft, coordinate responses. It was expensive, enormously complex, and it worked. SAGE showed that computers separated by hundreds or thousands of miles could work together, sharing information in real time. The concept of networked computing had proven itself. 9 years later, in 1969, something quieter but ultimately more significant happened. The United States Department of Defense's Advanced Research Projects Agency funded a project to connect research computers at different universities. They called it ARPANET. On October 29, 1969, the first message was sent over ARPANET. A researcher at UCLA tried to send the word login to a computer at Stanford Research Institute. The system crashed after transmitting just the letters L and O, but they fixed it, tried again, and it worked. Computers at different locations were talking to each other. ARPANET grew slowly at first. For nodes by the end of 1969, more universities and research institutions joining over the following years. Researchers could share data, send messages, access remote computers. ARPANET laid the foundation for the Internet. It pioneered the technologies, the protocols, the very concept of a network of networks that we rely on today. As ARPANET grew, people discovered uses that the designers hadn't anticipated. Electronic mail became popular. Researchers would send each other messages, collaborate across distances. It was convenient, it was immediate. Email became one of the earliest killer applications of networking. And in 1978, something less pleasant arrived. The first spam email was sent. A marketing manager at Digital Equipment Corporation sent an unsolicited advertisement to hundreds of ARPANET users, promoting a new computer. People were annoyed. This wasn't what email was for. But there it was. The first spam, the beginning of a problem that would only grow as networks expanded. Even innovations have their shadows. But let's step back to 1974, to something more fundamental. To computer scientists, Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn were working on a problem. Different computer networks used different protocols, different ways of formatting and transmitting data. How could you connect these disparate networks together? How could they all communicate? They developed TCP/IP, Transmission Control Protocol, and Internet Protocol. TCP handled breaking data into packets and reassembling them. IP handled addressing, making sure packets got to the right destination. Together, TCP/IP standardized Internet communication. This might sound technical, but it's the foundation of everything. Every time you load a web page, send an email, stream a video, TCP/IP is working underneath, quietly making sure data gets from one place to another. It's the language that all computers on the Internet speak. TCP/IP made the Internet possible as a unified, global network. ARPANET adopted TCP/IP in 1983, and gradually other networks did as well. The Internet, as we know it, a network of networks, all using the same protocols, was taking shape. Now jump forward to 1989, at CERN, the European Physics Research Centre in Switzerland. A British scientist named Tim Berners-Lee was thinking about information. CERN had researchers all over the world collaborating on experiments, generating enormous amounts of data and documentation. How could they share information easily? How could they link related documents together? Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web, not the Internet itself that already existed, but a system built on top of the Internet. He created three key things: HTML, hypertext markup language, for formatting documents; HTTP, hypertext transfer protocol, for transferring those documents between computers; and URLs, uniform resource locators, addresses that specify where documents are located. The genius was in the links. Documents could contain hyperlinks to other documents. Click on a link, and you jump to something else, maybe on a different computer halfway around the world. Information became interconnected, explorable. You could follow your curiosity from topic to topic, document to document. Berners-Lee could have patented this, could have become enormously wealthy. Instead, he gave it away, made it free for anyone to use and build upon. And people did. Websites multiplied. Web browsers were created to make accessing the web easier. By the mid-1990s, the World Wide Web was becoming a mass phenomenon, transforming commerce, communication, entertainment, everything. And finally, in 1991, a Finnish computer science student named Linus Torvalds was frustrated with the operating systems available for his computer. So he started writing his own. He called it Linux. But Torvalds did something unusual. He released his code freely, invited others to improve it, modify it, share it. Linux became a collaborative project, thousands of programmers around the world contributing. It became an example of open-source software, code that anyone could examine, improve, and use. Linux became the backbone of servers running the Internet. Most web servers run Linux. It powers Android phones. It runs supercomputers. It's in routers and embedded devices. Linux demonstrated that software could be built collaboratively, freely, and become the foundation for much of our digital infrastructure, from SAG's networked air defense to ARPANET's academic collaboration, from TCP/IP's universal language to the World Wide Web's interconnected information, from open-source Linux powering the infrastructure, computers connecting to each other, sharing information, building something larger than any single machine. Let this story of connection and collaboration ease you toward rest. Let's turn our attention now to software, to the instructions that make computers useful, and to the darker side of computing that emerged as systems became connected. Relax, let your thoughts drift, and explore this next chapter with me. We begin in 1952 with a remarkable woman named Grace Hopper. She was a mathematician, a naval officer, and a computer programmer working on some of the earliest computers. Grace Hopper had an idea that seemed almost radical at the time. What if programmers didn't have to write in machine code, in the raw ones and zeros that computers understand? What if they could write in something closer to human language, and have the computer translate it? She developed the first compiler. A compiler is a program that reads instructions written in a higher-level language and translates them into the machine code the computer can execute. This might not sound revolutionary, but think about what it meant. Programmers could focus on solving problems rather than wrestling with the minutiae of how the computer's hardware worked. Programming became more accessible, more productive. Grace Hopper's work led to the development of COBOL, a programming language designed for business applications. COBOL programs ran on countless systems for decades. Some still do. Her vision of making programming more human-friendly shaped how we write software today. Now, we need to step back 5 years, to 1947, because there's a story that's become legendary in computing. The term bug to describe a flaw or problem in a system had been used for decades in engineering. But in 1947, engineers working on the Harvard Mark II computer, one of those early electromechanical machines, found an actual moth trapped in one of the relays. The moth was causing the relay to malfunction. They carefully removed it, taped it into their logbook, and noted that they were debugging the system. It was a joke, a moment of humor. But that moth, preserved in the logbook, became famous. The first literal computer bug. It's a reminder that even in serious, technical work, there's room for playfulness and humanity. As computers became more common and began networking together, a new threat emerged. Computer viruses, programs designed to copy themselves, to spread from one computer to another, often causing harm along the way. In 1986, two brothers in Pakistan, Basit and Amjad Farooq Alvi, created something called the brain virus. It became the first PC virus, spreading through floppy disks. When you inserted an infected disk into your computer, the virus would copy itself to your hard drive and to any other floppy disks you used. Brain was relatively harmless, mostly an annoyance. The brothers claimed they created it to track pirated copies of their software. But it demonstrated something concerning. Software could spread on its own, could infect systems without the user's knowledge or consent. Computers could catch diseases, just like living organisms. 2 years later, in 1988, something more serious happened. A graduate student at Cornell University named Robert Tappan Morris created a program, a worm, designed to spread across the internet and measure its size. But Morris made mistakes in his code. The worm spread much faster than intended, copying itself over and over, overwhelming systems. The Morris worm brought thousands of computers to a halt, clogging networks, consuming resources. It spread autonomously across the internet, the first internet worm to gain significant attention. Morris was convicted under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. The incident showed how quickly malicious or even just careless code could spread across networked systems. The Internet's openness was also a vulnerability. In 1989, something even more sinister appeared. The AIDS Trojan, also called the PC Cyborg Trojan. It was distributed on floppy disks at an AIDS conference, claiming to contain information about AIDS. But once installed, it would count how many times the computer had been booted, and after a certain number, it would encrypt files on the hard drive and demand payment to decrypt them. The AIDS Trojan became the first ransomware. The concept of holding someone's data hostage for money, it wasn't very sophisticated by today's standards, and the encryption could be broken. But the idea was there. Malicious software that didn't just destroy or steal data, but held it ransom. As we moved into the late 1990s and early 2000s, email had become ubiquitous, and viruses learned to spread through it. In 1999, a programmer named David L. Smith created the Melissa virus. It spread through Microsoft Word documents attached to emails. When someone opened an infected document, Melissa would email itself to the first 50 contacts in their address book, and those recipients would open it, and it would spread to their contacts. Exponential growth. The Melissa virus crippled email systems worldwide. Companies had to shut down their email servers to stop the spread. Smith was eventually caught and sentenced to prison. Just a year later, in 2000, an even more damaging attack occurred. The Iloveo worm originated in the Philippines. It arrived as an email with the subject line, Iloveo, and an attachment. People opened it, curious or flattered, and the worms spread. Ilovo overwrote files, stole passwords, and emailed itself to everyone in the victim's contact list. It spread incredibly quickly, infecting millions of computers within days. The damage was estimated at billions of dollars. Businesses, governments, even military systems were affected. It was a wake-up call about how vulnerable networked systems had become. Also, in 2000, a different kind of defense emerged. Capture tests. Those little puzzles that ask you to identify distorted letters or click on pictures containing traffic lights. CAPTCHA stands for Completely Automated Public Turing Test, to tell computers and humans apart. The idea was simple. Create a test that's easy for humans but hard for automated programs, for bots. This helps websites block automated attacks, prevent spam, stop bots from creating fake accounts. It's a cat-and-mouse game. As artificial intelligence improves, CAPTCHA teasers have to become more sophisticated, but they represent an attempt to preserve human spaces in an increasingly automated internet. Now, let's jump forward to 2010 and something truly remarkable and disturbing. Stuxnet. This wasn't a virus created by criminals or mischievous hackers. Stuxnet was a sophisticated piece of malware, almost certainly created by nation-states, widely believed to be the United States and Israel. Stuxnet targeted very specific industrial control systems made by Siemens, the kind used in factories and power plants, and critically, in Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities. It was designed to sabotage uranium centrifuges, causing them to spin out of control while reporting to operators that everything was normal. Stuxnet became the first cyberweapon, the first malware specifically designed for physical sabotage and warfare. It demonstrated that cyber attacks could cross from the digital world into the physical world, could destroy machinery, could be tools of geopolitical conflict. The era of cyber warfare had arrived. From Grace Hopper's compiler making programming accessible, through decades of increasingly sophisticated threats, from simple viruses to global worms to state-sponsored cyberweapons. The story of software reflects both human creativity and human conflict. Let these stories settle gently in your mind as you drift towards sleep, aware of the complex digital world we've built together. Let's slow down now and look inside. Let's understand, at a comfortable pace, how computers actually work at their most fundamental level. No need to memorize anything. Just let these concepts wash over you as you relax. At the very heart of computing is something beautifully simple: binary. Computers process data in binary, in ones and zeros. Not because ones and zeros are special numbers, but because they're easy to represent physically. A switch can be on or off. A voltage can be high or low. A magnetic field can point one direction or another. On is 1, off is 0. That's all there is to it. Everything in your computer, every number, every letter, every image, every sound, is ultimately represented as patterns of ones and zeros. The number 5 is 101 in binary. The letter A is represented as 1,000,001. A red pixel on your screen is a particular pattern of ones and zeros, describing its color. Binary is the language computers speak, the only language they truly understand. Inside your computer is something called the CPU, the Central Processing Unit. This is the brain, the part that actually performs calculations and makes decisions. The CPU has two main components: the control unit, which manages what happens and when, directing traffic, and the ALU, the arithmetic logic unit, which performs the actual calculations, the addition and subtraction, the comparisons, the logical operations. Think of the control unit as a conductor of an orchestra, coordinating everything, and the ALU as the musicians, performing the actual work. Together they execute instructions, billions of them every second, each one a tiny step in whatever task you've asked the computer to do. The CPU needs places to store data while it's working, and the fastest storage is right there inside the processor itself. These are called registers. Tiny amounts of storage may be holding just a few numbers, but incredibly fast to access. Registers store ultra-fast, temporary data, the numbers the CPU is working with right this moment. When you add to numbers, the CPU loads them into registers, performs the addition in the ALU, and stores the result in another register. All of this happens in a fraction of a billionth of a second. Registers are expensive to build and take up space on the processor chip. So there aren't many of them, but they're essential for speed. The CPU works through a continuous cycle called the fetch-decode-execute cycle. This cycle powers all computation. First, fetch. The CPU retrieves an instruction from memory. What should I do next? Then, decode. The CPU interprets that instruction. What exactly does this instruction mean? What data does it need? Finally, execute. The CPU performs the instruction. Add these numbers. Move this data. Check if this condition is true. Then the cycle begins again. Fetch the next instruction. Decode it. Execute it. Over and over, billions of times per second. This simple cycle, repeated endlessly, is how computers do everything they do. Every video game, every spreadsheet calculation, every web page rendering. It's all just this cycle spinning incredibly fast. Now, computers need different types of memory for different purposes, and they're organized in what we call a memory hierarchy. This hierarchy balances speed and capacity. At the top, you have the fastest but smallest memory, the registers we mentioned. Below that, cache memory, still very fast but a bit larger. Below that, RAM, slower than cache but much larger. And at the bottom, hard drives or solid-state drives, very large but relatively slow. The principle is simple. Data you're using right now lives in fast memory. Data you might need soon lives in medium-speed memory. Data you're not currently using lives in slow but spacious storage. The computer constantly moves data up and down this hierarchy, trying to keep the information you need in the fastest memory possible. RAM, random access memory, is where your computer temporarily stores active programs. When you open an application, it loads from your hard drive into RAM. While it's running, all its data, all its working information, lives in RAM. RAM is much faster than a hard drive, so programs run quickly once they're loaded into memory. But RAM is volatile. When you turn off your computer, everything in RAM disappears. It only holds information while power is flowing. That's why you have to save your work. Saving writes data from RAM to your hard drive to permanent storage that persists even when the power is off. Between the CPU and RAM is another layer of memory called cache. Cache memory speeds up frequent access to data. The CPU looks in the cache first before going all the way to RAM. If the data it needs is in the cache, wonderful, that's fast. If not, it has to fetch it from RAM, which takes longer. Modern CPUs have multiple levels of cache. L1 cache, tiny but incredibly fast, built right into the processor core. L2 cache, a bit larger and slightly slower. Sometimes L3 cache, larger still. Each level is a compromise between speed and capacity. The computer tries to predict what data you'll need next and keeps it in cache, ready to go. All these components, the CPU, the RAM, the storage devices, need to communicate with each other. They do this through buses. Buses transfer data and control signals between components. Think of them as highways inside your computer. There's a data bus carrying actual data back and forth. An address bus specifying where data should go or come from. A control bus carrying signals that coordinate everything. These buses are just collections of wires, traces on a circuit board, but they're essential. Data flowing from memory to the CPU. Instructions flowing the other way. Addresses, specifying locations, control signals, timing, everything. Orchestrating all of this hardware is software, specifically the operating system. And at the core of the operating system is something called the kernel. The operating system kernel manages hardware resources. It decides which programs get to use the CPU and when. It allocates memory to programs. It handles input from your keyboard and mouse, output to your screen. It manages files on your storage devices. The kernel is a mediator between your programs and the hardware. Programs don't talk directly to hardware. They make requests to the kernel, and the kernel handles the details. This protects the hardware, prevents programs from interfering with each other, and makes programming easier because developers don't have to worry about the specifics of every piece of hardware their program might run on. And finally, there's a clever trick operating systems used called virtual memory. Sometimes your programs need more RAM than you physically have. Virtual memory extends RAM using disk space. The operating system takes portions of memory that aren't being actively used and temporarily writes them to the hard drive. This frees up RAM for what you're doing right now. When those inactive portions are needed again, the operating system swaps them back into RAM, moving something else to the disk if necessary. To the programs, it looks like there's more RAM than actually exists. It's slower than real RAM, because hard drives are slower, but it means you can run more programs simultaneously than would otherwise fit in memory. All of these concepts work together constantly. Binary data flowing through buses, the CPU fetching, decoding, and executing instructions. Data moving through the memory hierarchy. The operating system kernel coordinating everything. It's a symphony of electrical signals, a dance of information, happening billions of times per second, all so you can read an email or watch a video or write a document. Let the elegance of this complexity soothe you as you drift deeper into rest. Let's explore speed now. How computers became faster, not just through better technology, but through cleverness, through rethinking how work gets done. Settle in, breathe slowly, and let's discover the art of making computers faster. For decades, computers got faster mostly by making their components smaller and faster. Transistors shrank, clock speeds increased, each generation quicker than the last. But there's another way to increase speed. Don't make one worker faster. Use multiple workers at once. This is parallel processing, splitting work across cores. Modern CPUs have multiple cores, essentially multiple processors on a single chip. Your phone probably has 4, 6, or 8 cores. A high-end computer might have dozens. When you have multiple cores, you can work on different tasks simultaneously. One core handles your music player, another renders a video, another responds to your typing, all at the same time. The challenge is dividing work effectively. Some tasks are easy to split up, rendering different parts of an image, processing different elements of a list. Other tasks depend on previous results and can't be easily parallelized. But when it works, parallel processing dramatically increases what computers can accomplish. Even within a single core, there are tricks to increase speed. One is called pipelining. Pipelining overlaps instruction stages. Remember the fetch, decode, execute cycle. Normally, you'd finish executing one instruction before fetching the next. But why wait? Imagine an assembly line. While one instruction is being executed, the next one can be decoded, and the one after that can be fetched. Multiple instructions at different stages of completion, all progressing simultaneously. It's like a factory where products move through different stations, each station working on a different product at the same time. Pipelining keeps the CPU busy, reduces idle time, increases throughput. Another clever trick is branch prediction. Programs often make decisions. If this condition is true, do one thing. If it's false, do something else. The problem is, until you evaluate the condition, you don't know which path you'll take. And evaluating takes time. Branch prediction, guesses, execution paths. The CPU looks at the code and makes an educated guess about which way the branch will go, then starts working on that path before it knows for sure. If the guess is right, you've saved time. If it's wrong, you discard that work and try the other path. Modern processors are remarkably good at prediction, getting it right more than 90% of the time. This guessing game happens billions of times as your computer runs, mostly invisibly, making everything faster. Related to this is out-of-order execution. Normally, you'd execute instructions in the order they appear in the program, but sometimes an instruction has to wait, maybe for data to load from memory. Out-of-order execution maximizes efficiency by working on later instructions while waiting. The CPU looks ahead in the instruction stream, finds instructions that are ready to execute, ones that don't depend on the instruction that's waiting, and does those first. To the outside world, to the program, it looks like everything happened in the correct order. But internally, the CPU is constantly reordering work to avoid wasting time. It's like doing errands out of sequence to minimize waiting. Now, some types of calculations involve doing the same operation on many pieces of data at once. Processing pixels in an image, for instance. Every pixel needs similar calculations applied to it. SIMD, single instruction, multiple data, accelerates these vector calculations. Instead of processing one pixel at a time, SIMD instructions can process multiple pixels simultaneously. One instruction, but it operates on a whole vector of data at once. Modern processors have special SIMD units designed exactly for this kind of work. It's incredibly efficient for graphics, for scientific simulations, for any task that involves repetitive calculations on large datasets. In the 1980s, there was a philosophical debate in computer design. Processors had become complex, with hundreds of different instructions, each doing something specific. This was called CISC, Complex Instruction Set Computing. But some engineers thought differently. What if we simplified? RISC, Reduced Instruction Set Computing, simplifies instructions for speed. Instead of hundreds of complex instructions, have a smaller set of simple, fast instructions. Each instruction does less, but executes faster. Complex operations are built from combinations of simple instructions. RISC processors could run at higher clock speeds because each instruction was simpler. The design was cleaner, easier to optimize. Many modern processors, including those in phones and tablets, are based on RISC principles. Sometimes simpler is faster. But for certain tasks, even the fastest CPU isn't enough. Graphics, rendering, scientific simulations, machine learning, these involve massive amounts of parallel calculation. For this, we have GPUs, graphics processing units. GPUs handle massively parallel workloads. A GPU doesn't have a few powerful cores, like a CPU. It has hundreds or thousands of smaller, simpler cores. Each core isn't particularly smart or fast on its own, but together they can process enormous amounts of data in parallel. Originally designed for rendering graphics, for calculating the color of every pixel on your screen 60 times per second, GPUs turned out to be perfect for many other parallel tasks. Training neural networks, simulating physics, analyzing data. GPUs have become essential for modern computing, not just for games, but for scientific research and artificial intelligence. And for the most demanding calculations, for simulating nuclear weapons or predicting climate or modeling the universe itself, there are the CRAY1 introduced in 1976, was one of the most famous early supercomputers. It was shaped like a C, with cushioned seats built into the curve where engineers could sit while maintaining it. The CRAY-1 pushed scientific limits, performing millions of calculations per second. It was used for weather forecasting, for aerodynamic simulations, for cryptography. Supercomputers like the CRAY-1 showed what was possible when you devoted enormous resources to pure computational power. They were expensive, rare, but transformative for research. Modern supercomputers are millions of times faster than the CRAY-1, with thousands of processors working in parallel, consuming megawatts of power, solving problems that seemed impossible decades ago. They model protein folding for drug discovery, simulate entire galaxies forming, predict weather weeks in advance. From parallel cores to pipelined instructions, from branch prediction to specialized processors, computers became faster, not just by running faster, but by working smarter. Multiple strategies layered together, each contributing to the speed and capability we experience today. Let these concepts of efficiency and clever design ease you toward rest, the ingenuity of optimization carrying you gently toward sleep. We've traveled from the earliest computers to the machines we use today. Now let's look at the cutting edge, at specialized computing and glimpses of the future. Rest comfortably, let your mind wander gently through these ideas, and drift peacefully as we explore what's coming next. Most computers are general purpose. They can run any program, perform any task you ask of them. But sometimes you need something different. Sometimes you need hardware designed for one specific purpose, optimized completely for that task. These are called ASICs, application-specific integrated circuits. ASICs optimize hardware for specific tasks. Instead of a flexible processor that can do anything adequately, an ASIC does one thing extremely well. Bitcoin mining, for instance, uses ASICs designed purely for the cryptographic calculations involved. They can't do anything else, but they're incredibly efficient at that one task. Network routers often use ASICs to process data packets at high speed. Video encoding, signal processing, many specialized applications benefit from custom hardware. ASICs are expensive to design and manufacture. But for tasks that need to be performed millions or billions of times, the investment pays off in efficiency. But what if you want some of that efficiency without committing to a single purpose forever? That's where FPGAs come in. Field Programmable Gate Arrays. FPGAs allow reprogrammable hardware logic. An FPGA is a chip full of logic blocks that can be connected together in different ways. You program an FPGA by defining how these blocks should be wired and what they should do. Want it to be a signal processor? Configure it that way. Need it to be a networking device? Reconfigure it. The same physical chip can become different specialized hardware depending on how you program it. FPGAs aren't as efficient as ASICs for a specific task, but they're much more flexible. They're used in prototyping, in situations where requirements might change, in systems that need to adapt. They're a middle ground between the flexibility of software and the efficiency of custom hardware. In recent years, machine learning has become enormously important, and it requires massive amounts of computation. Training a neural network involves countless matrix multiplications, processing huge datasets. Google developed specialized chips called TPUs, Tensor Processing Units, specifically for this. TPUs accelerate machine learning workloads. They're optimized for the kinds of calculations neural networks require, not general-purpose computing, but extremely efficient at matrix operations. At the mathematical transformations that power artificial intelligence, TPUs help make it practical to train and run the large language models and image recognition systems that have become so prevalent. Underlying many of these specialized processors is a concept called systolic arrays. Imagine data flowing through a grid of processors like blood flowing through a circulatory system. Each processor performs a calculation and passes results to its neighbors. Data pulses rhythmically through the array. Systolic arrays power matrix-heavy computations. They're incredibly efficient for the kind of repetitive, structured calculations that machine learning requires. Data moves in regular patterns. Each processor stays busy, and results emerge without the constant back and forth to memory that would slow down a traditional processor. As we push the limits of what's possible with computer chips, engineers are rethinking how they're built. Instead of making one enormous chip, what if you made several smaller chips and connected them together? This is called chiplet-based design. Chiplet-based designs improve scalability. Smaller chips are easier to manufacture, have better yields, and can be mixed and matched. Maybe you need more processing power but not more memory. Add more processor chiplets. Need specialized functionality. Add a chiplet for that. It's modular computing at the hardware level, and it's becoming increasingly common in high-performance processors. Memory has always been a bottleneck. Data has to travel from memory chips to the processor and back. That distance, even though it's just centimeters, creates delay. What if memory could be stacked vertically, right on top of or underneath the processor? 3D stacked memory reduces latency by bringing memory physically closer to where it's needed. Chips are layered like a sandwich, with vertical connections between them. Data doesn't have to travel as far, so it arrives faster. Heat management becomes more challenging when chips are stacked, but the performance benefits are significant. Traditional memory is either fast but volatile, like RAM, or persistent but slower, like hard drives. Researchers have been working on memory technologies that blur this distinction. Phase change memory is one approach. Phase change memory blends speed and persistence. It uses materials that can switch between crystalline and amorphous states. Different states have different electrical properties, so they can store ones and zeros. The material retains its state without power, so the memory is persistent. But it can be switched quickly, so it's relatively fast. It's not quite as fast as RAM or as cheap as hard drives, but it occupies an interesting middle ground. Another emerging technology is STT-MRAM. Spin transfer torque magnetoresistive RAM. That's a mouthful, but the concept is fascinating. It stores data in magnetic states, which persist without power, making it not volatile. But unlike traditional magnetic storage, it can be read and written very quickly. STT-MRAM offers non-volatile, high-endurance memory. It can be written to millions or billions of times without wearing out. Unlike flash memory, which has limited write cycles, it's fast, persistent, and durable. As the technology matures and costs come down, it could replace various types of memory we use today, simplifying the memory hierarchy. Traditionally, computing works by moving data from storage to memory to the processor, doing calculations, and moving results back. But moving data consumes time and energy. What if you could compute where the data already lives? In memory, computing reduces data movement by performing calculations directly in memory chips. Instead of moving data to the processor, you add computational capability to the memory itself. For certain types of workloads, especially those involving large datasets, this can be much more efficient. The architecture of computing is shifting to minimize data movement, recognizing that communication is often more expensive than calculation. Related to this is near data processing, bringing computation closer to where data is stored. Maybe not in the memory itself, but nearby. reducing the distance data has to travel. In data centers, processing enormous amounts of information, moving data across networks, or even across a server, is expensive. Near data processing improves efficiency by doing as much work as possible close to the storage. And increasingly, computing systems are heterogeneous, mixing different types of processors for different tasks. Heterogeneous computing combines CPUs, GPUs, and specialized accelerators in a single system. The CPU handles general tasks and coordination. The GPU processes parallel workloads. Specialized accelerators handle specific tasks like cryptography, video encoding, or neural network inference. Modern smartphones are perfect examples of heterogeneous computing. They have CPU cores, GPU cores, neural processing units for AI tasks, image signal processors for the camera, all working together. Each component does what it's best at, and software orchestrates them. The future of computing isn't just making one type of processor faster. It's about using the right tool for each job. From custom ASICs to flexible FPGAs, from AI-focused TPUs to emerging memory technologies, from chiplets to 3D stacking, computing is becoming more specialized, more efficient, more diverse. Engineers are finding new ways to organize hardware, new materials and technologies, new architectures. The rate of change continues, driven by new applications, new challenges, new ideas. Think about how far we've come. From Babbage's theoretical analytical engine to heterogeneous systems with billions of transistors working in concert. From vacuum tubes filling rooms to chips smaller than your fingernail containing entire computers. From batch processing to real-time interaction to always connected devices in our pockets. Every step built on what came before. Every innovation opened new possibilities. The computers of today would seem like magic to the pioneers of the 1940s. Yet, they rest on the same fundamental principles. Binary logic, stored programs, sequential execution, just taken to extraordinary scales and speeds. Let these thoughts of progress and innovation settle over you like a warm blanket. The ingenuity of generations of engineers and scientists, each contributing to this remarkable technology we live with every day. Rest easy in the knowledge of how much human creativity has accomplished, and drift peacefully into sleep. Let's continue our journey into the frontiers of computing, exploring ideas that challenge how we think about speed, accuracy, and efficiency. Relax, breathe deeply, and let these concepts flow over you like a gentle stream. For most of computing history, we've assumed that accuracy is non-negotiable. Computers must get the exact right answer every single time. But what if that's not always necessary? What if, for some tasks, a pretty good answer that arrives quickly is better than a perfect answer that takes longer? This is the idea behind approximate computing. Approximate computing trades accuracy for speed. For certain applications, like image processing or video encoding or machine learning, perfect precision isn't required. Your eye can't tell if a pixel is slightly the wrong shade. A neural network can tolerate small errors in calculation. By allowing tiny inaccuracies, processors can skip some steps, use less power, generate less heat, work faster. It's a deliberate choice, carefully controlled, to sacrifice a bit of precision for significant gains in efficiency. It seems counterintuitive at first, doesn't it? Computers that deliberately make small mistakes. But for the right applications, it's remarkably practical. Remember pipeline stalls. When the processor has to wait for something and the pipeline sits idle, wasting time, engineers have developed various techniques to reduce these stalls. One approach is called value prediction. Value prediction tries to guess what the result of a calculation will be before actually performing it. The processor looks at patterns, at history, and makes an educated guess. If the prediction is right, work can continue immediately, without waiting. If it's wrong, the work is discarded and redone correctly. It's another gamble, like branch prediction, betting that guessing right most of the time is better than always waiting. Another technique for hiding delays is speculative decoupling. When the processor needs data from memory, which is slow, it can speculatively continue executing as if the data had already arrived, making assumptions about what that data might be. Speculative decoupling hides memory latency by working ahead based on predictions. The processor generates multiple possible futures, different execution paths based on different assumptions about the delayed data. When the data finally arrives, the processor knows which path was correct and continues from there, having already done much of the work. The wrong paths are discarded. It's like a chess player thinking several moves ahead, considering multiple possibilities simultaneously. Modern processors can adjust their speed dynamically. When you're doing demanding work, the processor runs fast. When you're idle or doing simple tasks, it slows down to conserve power and reduce heat. This is adaptive clocking. Adaptive clocking balances power and performance by continuously adjusting the processor's clock speed based on workload and temperature. Your laptop might run its CPU at different speeds throughout the day. Faster when rendering video, slower when you're just reading text. This extends battery life, reduces fan noise, and prevents overheating, all while providing performance when you need it. Now, let's think about something fundamental. Inside computers, information moves as electrical signals through copper wires and traces. But electricity through copper has limitations. Resistance creates heat. Signals can interfere with each other. There's a speed limit to how fast electrical signals can travel. What if we used light instead? Photonics uses light for data transfer. Optical fibers carry data as pulses of light. They're already used for long-distance communication, for internet backbone connections. But researchers are working on bringing photonics inside computers, using light to move data between chips or even within chips. Light can carry more data, travel faster, generate less heat, and signals don't interfere with each other the way electrical signals do. Photonic computing is still mostly experimental, but it promises to overcome some fundamental limitations of electrical interconnects. Imagine data flowing through your computer as beams of light, silent and incredibly fast. Here's another fascinating idea, borrowed from neuroscience. Your brain doesn't separate memory and processing the way computers do. Each neuron both stores information in its connections and processes signals. What if we built computer hardware that worked similarly? Memristors are electronic components that can both store data and perform calculations. Memristors mimic brain-like computing. They remember their resistance based on the history of current that's flowed through them. They can be arranged in arrays that work somewhat like neural networks, processing and storing simultaneously. Memristors could enable neuromorphic computing, computers that operate more like brains, with massive parallelism and low power consumption. It's a radically different architecture from traditional von Neumann computing. Still largely experimental, but researchers are exploring how memristor-based systems might enable new types of artificial intelligence or ultra-efficient computing. We talked earlier about specialized hardware, ASICs, and TPUs and such. This trend is accelerating. For many tasks, general-purpose CPUs are inefficient. They're flexible, but that flexibility has costs. Domain-specific architectures outperform general CPUs by being optimized for particular types of work. Not just one task like an ASIC, but a whole domain. An architecture for database queries, an architecture for cryptography, an architecture for scientific simulation. Each one makes trade-offs, giving up some flexibility to gain enormous efficiency for its intended purpose. We're seeing computing fragment into specialized domains, each with hardware designed specifically for it. Your computer might have a dozen different processors, each excellent at its own thing. The era of one general CPU doing everything is gradually ending, replaced by heterogeneous systems with domain-specific components. But this creates a challenge. How do all these different processors share memory efficiently? Traditionally, each type of processor has its own memory, and moving data between them is slow and complicated. Engineers developed a new standard called CXL, Compute Express Link. CXL unifies memory access across different types of processors. It's a high-speed interconnect that allows CPUs, GPUs, accelerators, and other devices to share a common memory pool coherently. Everyone sees the same data, can access it with low latency, without complicated copying back and forth. This makes heterogeneous computing much more practical. Imagine your CPU processes some data, hands it off to a GPU for parallel processing, which passes results to a specialized accelerator, all working with the same memory seamlessly. CXL is enabling the kind of efficient collaboration between different processors that future computing will require, from approximate computing's deliberate trade-offs to adaptive clocking's dynamic balancing, from photonics light-speed data to memristor's brain-like architecture, from domain-specific designs to unified memory access. Computing continues to evolve in fascinating directions. Engineers question assumptions, explore alternatives, push boundaries. Each innovation responds to challenges. Power consumption limits how fast we can run processors. Memory bandwidth bottlenecks performance. Specialized tasks demand specialized solutions. And engineers respond creatively, finding new approaches, new technologies, new architectures. The computers of tomorrow will work differently than the computers of today, just as today's computers work differently than those of decades past. But they'll still rest on the same foundation, the same basic principles, just expressed in new and clever ways. Let the creativity and ingenuity of these ideas carry you peacefully toward sleep. The endless human drive to build better tools, to solve problems, to imagine what's possible. We've traveled a long road together, from the earliest concepts to the cutting edge of technology. Now, as we near the end, let's step back and see the bigger picture. Rest comfortably, let your breathing slow, and reflect on this remarkable journey. Computers evolved from theory into world-changing machines. Think about where we started. Charles Babbage sketching designs for mechanical calculators that couldn't be built. Alan Turing imagining theoretical machines on infinite strips of tape. These were ideas, mathematics, philosophy about what it means to compute. And gradually, impossibly, those ideas became real. Vacuum tubes and relays clicking away in room-sized machines. Transistors shrinking everything down. Integrated circuits putting entire systems on chips. What began as thought experiments became the foundation of modern civilization. Theory became reality, and that reality transformed the world. Computers reshaped communication, science, and society in ways those early pioneers could never have imagined. Communication changed utterly. Letters gave way to email. Phone calls became video chats. Information that once took days or weeks to travel now moves instantly across the globe. We're connected constantly, able to reach anyone, anywhere, find any information, share any thought. Science accelerated beyond recognition. Simulations let us model phenomena we can't observe directly. The formation of galaxies, the folding of proteins, the behavior of subatomic particles. Data analysis reveals patterns in massive datasets that no human could find manually. Computers became partners in discovery, essential tools for understanding our universe, and society transformed. How we work, how we shop, how we learn, how we entertain ourselves, how we govern, how we create art. Entire industries emerged that couldn't exist without computers. Our economy, our culture, our daily lives are now inseparable from computing technology. We carry more computing power in our pockets than existed in the entire world when the first computers were built. But this transformation brought challenges. Security threats evolved alongside computing power. As computers connected into networks, as they began holding our data, our money, our secrets, they became targets. What began with harmless pranks and curious exploration evolved into organized crime, espionage, and warfare. Every innovation in computing brings new security challenges. Cloud computing means trusting others with your data. Internet of Things means everyday devices can be compromised. Artificial intelligence might be manipulated or used for harmful purposes. The same connectivity that enables so much good also creates vulnerability. Security isn't a problem to be solved once, but an ongoing challenge. An arms race between those who protect and those who attack. Modern systems focus on efficiency and specialization. We've reached a point where simply making things faster isn't enough. Power consumption matters. Heat dissipation matters. The right tool for the right job matters. Computing is becoming more sophisticated, more nuanced. Instead of building ever larger general-purpose processors, we're building diverse ecosystems of specialized components working together. Instead of brute force, we use clever architectures, approximate methods, predictive techniques. Computing is maturing, becoming more elegant, more efficient, more tailored to specific needs. And increasingly, AI workloads drive new architectures. Machine learning has become one of the most important applications of computing, and it requires enormous amounts of calculation. Training large language models, processing images and video, running recommendation systems. All of this demands specialized hardware. We've seen TPUs, neural processing units, memristor arrays, entire chip designs optimized for matrix multiplication and parallel data processing. The architecture of computing is being reshaped by the needs of artificial intelligence. And as AI becomes more capable, more prevalent, this trend will only accelerate. The computers of the future will be designed with AI workloads as a primary consideration. In a sense, computing is moving closer to the brain. Not just in the architecture of specialized neural processors, but in the whole philosophy. The brain doesn't separate memory and processing. It operates in parallel. Millions of neurons working simultaneously. It's fault-tolerant, continuing to function even when components fail. It's incredibly power-efficient, running on about 20 watts. Computing has followed a different path. Von Neumann architecture with separated memory and processing, serial execution, precise calculation. But now we're exploring alternatives. Neuromorphic computing, in-memory processing, massively parallel systems. We're learning from biology, from evolution's solution to information processing. The computers of the future might work more like brains than like the machines we know today. And here's the beautiful truth. The future of computers is still being written. Everything we've talked about, from Babbage's analytical engine to memristors and photonics, is part of an ongoing story. Right now, somewhere, engineers and scientists are working on the next breakthrough. The next innovation that will seem obvious in hindsight, but revolutionary in the moment. Maybe it's quantum computing, using the strange properties of quantum mechanics to solve problems classical computers can't. Maybe it's biological computing, using DNA or proteins as information processors. Maybe it's something we haven't even imagined yet. a completely new paradigm waiting to be discovered. The story of computers is a story of human creativity and persistence, of people imagining what could be, then making it real, of problems that seemed impossible until someone solved them, of technologies that seemed magical until we understood them, then became everyday tools we take for granted. Every device you use, every app you open, every search you perform, rests on this foundation. Generations of innovation, each generation building on the work of those before. The QWERTY keyboard from 1873 typewriters, Ada Lovelace's algorithms from the 1840s, von Neumann's architecture from 1945, the transistor, the integrated circuit, the microprocessor, the internet, the World Wide Web, all of it connected, all of it part of one continuous story of human ingenuity. And you're part of this story too. Every time you use a computer, you're standing on the shoulders of giants, benefiting from the accumulated work of countless people who built this technology, piece by piece, over more than a century. From theory to reality, from room-sized machines to chips smaller than your fingernail, from isolated calculators to a global network connecting billions of devices. It's a remarkable journey, and it continues into futures we can barely imagine, built by people not yet born, solving problems we haven't encountered, using technologies that don't exist. The story of computers is far from over. In many ways, it's only beginning. Rest now. Let these stories settle peacefully in your mind. The long arc of computing history, from past through present into an open future. The ingenuity, the creativity, the endless human drive to build, to improve, to imagine what's possible and make it real. Let it all wash over you gently as you drift into deep, peaceful sleep.